Marianne Williamson is an author, political activist, and spiritual leader. Now she wants to be president of the United States. So why does she think she should replace Joe Biden? She's here to tell us about it. So could you do a better job than Joe Biden?
I think I would do a different job that I believe would be much better for our people and for our country. The president takes an incremental approach to dealing with the fact that there's gargantuan suffering in this country. We have 70% of Americans who say that they live with chronic economic stress. We have 1 in 4 Americans who live with medical debt. Half of our seniors live on less than $25,000 a year. We have 1/3 of our workforce who live on $15 an hour and can't even afford a place to live. So the president,
not to interrupt you, but it sounds like you're talking about a lot of social welfare programs that's going to cost a lot of money and tax a lot of people.
I'll tell you, the social welfare programs that we should be concerned with are the multi-billions of dollars that we spend in subsidies to industries and corporations that are already making billions of dollars. Basically, the tax cuts to the very wealthy in this country amount to a kind of social welfare program. The fact that we have such a gargantuan defense budget, when 60 Minutes recently did an expose where it is so established now, the price gouging that is going on the U.S. military on the part of defense contractors. Those are the social welfare programs, the ones that we give to the very, very rich.
I think that you can understand that when people hear you talking about these things, they say, how much more are you going to hit me in my pocketbook, in my taxes, to do these things that sound so wonderful?
Well, the only people who are saying that about which it's true are the very, very wealthy, whose day would not in any way be disturbed by the kinds of taxes that I'm talking about. Not every rich person in this country is a greedy bastard. And I also think that people recognize that this collective, almost ubiquitous level of chronic economic anxiety in this country is unsustainable for all of us. It cannot continue like this. It's literally leading to the decline of our democracy.
Do you think Joe Biden is too old to be president?
You know, Donald Trump is 2 years younger. I think that the individual has to decide for themselves how they feel about that. We've all seen the gaffes. I think whether he's...
But when you campaign, are you going to exacerbate that, or are you going to focus on it? Are you going to say...
Listen, I can defeat the president based on policies. I'm standing for an economic new beginning in this country. I'm standing for the average American citizen having the same rights as they have in every other advanced democracy. Universal health care, tuition-free college and tech school, paid family leave, a guaranteed living wage, whether the president was 50 years old or almost 80 years old. He's not standing for those things, and I am.
So one of the things that you do want to do is spend up to between $200 and $500 billion on reparations. Why would you do that, and how will you pay for it?
You know, first of all, it's an amount of money that would be dispersed over 20 years. And when the pay gap is closed between black Americans, or the wealth gap is closed between black Americans and white Americans, this will make our economy $1.5 trillion larger. So the kind of thing we're talking about here is actually an expansion for America's economy.
Would there be a new tax? How would you pay for it?
Well, what my plan is an actual, that we would have a plan, a council of black elders who would oversee the money to be dispersed over.
But where does the money come from?
Where do you think any of our money comes from?
Like tax
Where
people.
do you think the money? Yeah, that's right. And so right now the taxpayers are paying once again for this overbloated. So
if you do
wait,
that,
can we go back to why I want to pay reparations?
I just wonder how you get how you pay for it, and if you do, what do you cut in order to get the money?
Well, that's really not kind of how money works on a federal level. But when you look at the fact that we have a 2017 $2 trillion tax cut, 83 cents of every dollar went to the highest earners and the richest corporations. Now, I would repeal that tax cut, although I would put back in the middle class tax cut. So the middle class should not be paying any more than it's paying. We should have a wealth tax, however. We should have for those who make $50 million and more. I don't have any problem asking for them for another 2% every year. It wouldn't disturb anybody's day. And if you have $1 billion of assets, I wouldn't have a problem asking for a 1% above that. Why are we so caring so much for those who have so much and caring so little for those who have too little?
You know, one of the things that concerned me a lot is the rise of hate. Yes. In the United States, and also the dysfunction in Washington where people don't seem to get along. I know that you would like to have a Department of Peace. What would that accomplish?
You know, I think a lot of people don't realize that peace building is an actual thing. There are 4 factors which, if present, statistically indicate that there will be a higher level of peace in a system and a lower level of violence. And those 4 factors are, number 1, expanded economic opportunities for women, expanded educational opportunities for children, a reduction of violence against women, and the amelioration of unnecessary human despair. Now, that's true if it's a corner of a U.S. city or another corner of the world. Even Donald Rumsfeld, who worked for George Bush during the Iraq War, said we must learn to wage peace. We will be a violent society until we choose to become a nonviolent one. And I think a lot of people on both left and right are disturbed by exactly what you said and know that we have to turn a corner. We need to, all of us, look both in our hearts and in our society for ways in which we can cultivate a more peaceful world.
But on the other hand, there are those who also talk about the idea that that the United States as a superpower has to maintain its defensive capabilities. And that's something that you would want to do or you want to cut?
Well, we absolutely. But I look at the U.S. military like I look at a surgeon. Absolutely, we need to have a surgeon on hand, and we should have the very best surgeon on hand. However, a reasonable person tries to avoid surgery if at all possible.
So are you going to cut the military?
Yes, but that has nothing to do with decreasing our military capability. I mentioned before the price gouging that is going on, that is now well established. So the most conservative think tanks talk about how we could cut 10%. I think we could cut 20%, and we need to do much more, use much more of our resources on the kind of humanitarian efforts and diplomatic efforts that will make military conflict much less probable.
You know, one issue that a number of Democrats have talked about for the last year have been decisions from the Supreme Court. But one of the things that I've sort of focused on are recent stories about trips that are taken by members of the Supreme Court, gifts that are given to members of the Supreme Court. And there's now legislation in Washington which would set some ethical rules for the Supreme Court. Now, some people say it's a separate branch of government and they should police themselves. In Congress now, they're thinking maybe they should pass some rules. I wonder how you would come down as president if you were elected on that topic.
Well, the Supreme Court is the only level of the U.S. judiciary that is not bound by ethics rules, because it was always assumed that these guys would hold a higher standard. What we're seeing now makes it obvious that that's not true. The fact that it's a separate branch of government doesn't mean that it shouldn't be held accountable. It should be held accountable. I think people are concerned about this for a reason. The corruption is so obvious at this point.
So what kind of changes would you like to see? Would you like to see reporting requirements?
It should be the same as every other level of the federal judiciary. Those ethics laws already exist at every other level.
How about immigration? Immigration has become a big problem here in New York City, where over 83,000 asylum seekers have now come to New York because it's a sanctuary city. As president, how would you change, or what would you do in terms of immigration?
We need to recognize that we're treating the symptom here, and we need to address the cause. And a lot of that has to do with U.S. foreign policy over the last few decades that has exacerbated some of so much of the economic stability in some of these Latin American countries. Also, I think we should end the drug war. That won't solve every problem.
So are you going to close the borders?
No, we cannot close the borders. I would not close the borders. We need to have pathways to legal immigration, but we need to do everything possible to stop the flow. So when we talk, for instance, about the drug war, most of this horror that people are escaping, and they are escaping horrors of violence beyond what the average American can even imagine, is due to the drug cartels. And what we're doing now is not working.
What would you do?
Well, you stop that, and then you regulate the drugs so that they don't have the kind of power in this country that you have.
But you don't have the power. I mean, we only have about 30 seconds left, but you don't have the power to go into Mexico and other places and say, this is what you have to do.
No, unfortunately, Mexico is not cooperating with us as much as we would like, but we can control what we can control, and we can make sure that there is simply not so much of a demand here on this side for what the drug cartels are bringing in.
15 seconds. What would you do to stop the demand?
Well, once you regulate drugs, we need to decriminalize drugs in the United States. What we're doing now is not working.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But we'll have much more with Marianne Williamson on our streaming channel, CBS News New York.